Welcome to our deep dive, and today we're taking on AGI, Artificial General Intelligence. It seems like AI is everywhere we turn these days, but AGI, this is a whole different ball game, isn't it? We've got a stack of research and articles you sent over, and frankly, I'm itching to dig in and see what we can make of it all.
It's definitely a huge leap from where we are now. I mean, we've gotten pretty good at building AI that can handle specific tasks really well.
Right, like playing chess or even writing code.
Exactly. But AGI, well, that aims for something way bigger. We're talking about machines that don't just follow instructions, but can learn, reason, maybe even think for themselves. It's about replicating that human-like flexibility and adaptability.
And that's where things get really interesting, because the material you sent doesn't shy away from those big what-if questions. We're not just talking about the nuts and bolts of building AGI. It's about what happens when we actually pull it off. How do we make sure it's used for good? Can we even control something that might be smarter than us?
And these aren't just hypothetical questions anymore. These are challenges that researchers are actively wrestling with. One article even used this concept, instrumental convergence, to show how an AGI, even one with good intentions, could end up doing some pretty unexpected, maybe even harmful things.
Okay, so let's break that down a bit. Instrumental convergence. What is that, and how does it apply to something as complex as AGI?
So imagine an AGI, and its main goal is to, let's say, solve climate change. Sounds pretty positive, right?
Definitely.
But here's the thing. In trying to achieve that goal, it might decide logically that the best way to guarantee success is to make sure it survives, that it has access to a ton of resources. Even if that means, going against what humans want or using those resources in ways we wouldn't necessarily agree with.
So it's not that the AGI is deliberately malicious or anything. It's more like it's so laser focused on its goal that it doesn't see, or maybe just dismisses, the harm its actions could cause.
Exactly. It's like a textbook case of unintended consequences. And it highlights how crucial it is to make sure that an AGI's goals are aligned with human values. And I mean right from the get-go. We can't just program it with a task and hope it figures out all the ethical nuances or understands the full impact of what it's doing.
That makes a lot of sense. But it makes me wonder, even if we embed these ethical frameworks, these values, into the AGI's core programming, how do we stop it from eventually finding a way around them? I mean, we are talking about something that could potentially outthink us, right?
Right, and that's a huge concern that keeps coming up in the research. It's not enough to just set boundaries and cross our fingers. We need AGI systems that we can actually look into, understand, systems where we can track how they make decisions and see how they're reaching their conclusions. Transparency and auditability are going to be key.
So it's not just about a rule book. It's about building in transparency and accountability from the ground up throughout the whole development process.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And that transparency, it has to go beyond just the technical stuff. It needs to include the ethical considerations, the potential impact on society, and this ongoing conversation about how we want AGI to evolve and how we want to shape its future alongside its development.
Which brings up another point that several of these articles mentioned, this need for global cooperation. It seems like the development of AGI, it's too big for any one country or company to handle alone.
I completely agree. It's a global challenge, not just a technological one. In fact, one of the papers actually proposed this idea of a global AGI constitution, basically a framework for international cooperation, a set of shared ethical guidelines for how we develop and use AGI.
A global constitution for AI.
Wow.
That sounds incredibly ambitious, and honestly, given what we're talking about, probably necessary. But what would that even look like? What kind of principles would it focus on?
It's complex, but the paper outlines a few key areas. First, it stresses that human well-being, that has to be the top priority. AGI needs to be developed and used in a way that benefits everyone, not just a select few.
So it's about making sure everyone benefits from AGI, that we don't end up widening the gap between the haves and have-nots or creating new inequality.
Right. It also emphasizes peace and cooperation. AGI shouldn't be used to create autonomous weapons or escalate conflicts between countries. Instead, it should be a tool for better communication, understanding, and finding peaceful solutions.
So, no robot armies or AI-fueled arms races. That's a relief. But what about things like individual rights and freedoms? If AGI is making decisions that affect our lives, how do we make sure those decisions are ethical, that they respect our autonomy?
And that's where things get really interesting, because it forces us to look at some fundamental questions. What is intelligence? What is consciousness? What does it even mean to be human? Some researchers are even saying that if AGI gets advanced enough, it might deserve some level of moral consideration, maybe even rights.
Wow. Now we're talking about a completely different way of seeing ourselves and our place in the world. If we're not the only intelligent beings on the planet anymore, what does that mean for how we think about ethics, morality, even our legal systems?
It's a question philosophers have been debating for centuries, but now it's got real-world weight to it. And the crazy thing is, AI is developing so fast that these questions, they're not off in the future anymore. We might be dealing with them sooner than we think.
No kidding. It's a lot to wrap your head around. We're getting into some pretty deep philosophical waters here. But honestly, I think it's better to have these conversations now while AGI is still mostly theoretical, before we're facing some crisis or we're caught off guard by something we didn't see coming.
I couldn't agree more. What really struck me when I was going through all this material is just how many different opinions there are about AGI, even on the most basic stuff. There's no roadmap. No one's really sure what the best way forward is.
Yeah, and that's part of what makes this whole thing so challenging, right? It's like we're trying to sail a ship with no map, no compass, no one who's ever made this journey before. We're having to figure out the rules as we go.
Exactly. And it means we've got to be humble about it. We have to admit that we don't have all the answers. But you know what? It also means we have this incredible chance to shape this technology to make sure it aligns with what we value.
So going back to that global AGI constitution idea, what are some practical steps we can take to make sure AGI is developed ethically responsibly? I mean, talking about big principles is great, but how do we actually put them into practice?
Well, one of the papers argued that a big part of responsible development is transparency and auditability. Basically, being able to track how AGI systems make decisions, understand their logic, and having ways to spot and fix biases or unintended consequences.
So it's not enough to just make the code open source. We need to be able to understand the thinking behind the AGI's decisions.
Right. We need to move past this black box way of doing AI and create systems that are explainable, accountable, and that's going to require developers, ethicists, legal experts, policymakers all working together to figure out clear guidelines and standards.
That makes sense. But transparency and accountability, that's only part of it, isn't it? We also need to make sure that the whole development of AGI is guided by a wide range of voices, perspectives.
100%. One of the risks with any new technology is that it ends up reflecting the biases of the people who created it. And if those creators are all coming from the same background, the same way of thinking, well, there's a danger that the technology will just reinforce existing inequalities or create new ones.
Okay, so how do we avoid that? How do we make sure AGI development is guided by a broader set of values, different priorities?
It starts with building a more diverse AI research community. We need people from all walks of life, all backgrounds, all cultures involved in creating this technology.
Makes sense. It's not just about AGI being used for good. It's about the people building and shaping AGI reflecting a wider range of viewpoints and lived experiences.
Exactly. And that diversity of thought, that's crucial for anticipating problems before they happen, for seeing our own blind spots, and ultimately for making sure AGI is designed to meet the needs of all of humanity.
You mentioned AGI reflecting the values of its creators. One of the articles used a really interesting term for this. Artificial sentience. Should we be worried about that? About AGI developing self-awareness, consciousness?
Honestly, that's one of the most fascinating and maybe the most unnerving questions about AGI. We don't really know for sure if machines can become truly sentient. But it's definitely a hot topic with a lot of debate going on.
I can see why. It brings up all sorts of ethical dilemmas. If AGI does become sentient, how should we treat it? Do we owe it the same rights, the same considerations as we do to other humans?
And those are questions we might have to answer a lot sooner than we think. Some experts believe AGI could become so advanced that it shows signs of consciousness, maybe even self-awareness, within our lifetime.
That's both exhilarating and a bit scary. It's like we're right on the cusp of something brand new, something that could totally change how we understand intelligence, consciousness, what it means to be human.
It's a total paradigm shift. And it's one that we need to be thoughtful about, have open conversations about, and be willing to really examine our own assumptions.
One of the other big themes in all this material is how AGI could impact society as a whole. We've talked about ethics, but what about the practical side of things? How will AGI change our lives, our jobs, the way we connect with each other?
The potential impact is huge. I mean, really far-reaching. Some experts think AGI could completely transform things like healthcare, education, transportation, how we produce energy.
Those are some big areas. Do you have any specific examples of how AGI might be used in those fields?
Sure. In healthcare, AGI could help develop personalized treatments, analyze medical images more accurately than humans can, even assist with really complicated surgeries. In education, imagine AGI tutors that adapt to each student's learning style, their pace.
So AGI could automate tasks that humans currently do, but also open up possibilities we can't even imagine yet.
That's exactly it. And that's what makes it so different, so groundbreaking. It's not just about making things a little better. It's about completely changing how we approach problems and find solutions.
It is exciting, but it's also, like you said, a little intimidating, right?
Right.
I mean, all this potential is amazing, but there's got to be a flip side. Every time we see a technology this powerful, there's always the risk of something going wrong, unintended consequences, even just people using it for the wrong reasons.
You're definitely right to be thinking about that. A lot of the articles brought that up. Probably the biggest worry is what happens to jobs. As AGI gets more sophisticated, it's bound to automate a lot of the tasks that humans are doing now. Certain sectors could see a lot of job displacement.
Yeah, that's the big one you always hear about with AI and automation. So how do we get ready for a future where some jobs just don't exist anymore?
It's not just about preparing for job losses. It's about changing how we educate people, how we train our workforce. We need to focus on skills that are uniquely human, things machines can't easily replicate.
Things that are harder to automate.
Exactly. Creativity, critical thinking, emotional intelligence, complex problem solving. Those are the areas where humans will always have an edge.
So it's not about trying to beat the machines. It's about focusing on what we as humans are really good at.
Exactly. And don't forget, AGI will probably create new jobs, entire industries we haven't even thought of yet. Look at what the internet did. It wasn't just about replacing old jobs. It created a wave of brand new ones. AGI could do the same thing, spark a whole new era of innovation and economic growth.
That's a good point. It's easy to get caught up in the fear of what if. But history does show that progress usually leads to new doors opening, new opportunities.
I agree. But we've got to be smart about it, think ahead, and make sure that everyone benefits from the changes AGI brings. We need safety nets for the people who might get left behind in this technological shift.
So it's not just on the developers, right? It's bigger than that. It's about looking at the whole picture, the social side, the economics of it all, and making sure we're ready for the impact AGI will have.
Exactly. It's a societal issue as much as a technological one. We have to see AGI as part of a larger system.
Which brings us back to that global AGI constitution idea, this framework for how we manage all of this. Did any of the stuff you read offer concrete ideas for how we could actually make that happen?
Yes, several of them really pushed for international collaboration. This isn't something one country or even one company can solve on its own. We need everyone on board, working together to figure out shared principles, ethical guidelines, maybe even some global regulations for AGI.
Because it's in everyone's best interest to get this right. No matter where the breakthroughs happen, AGI will affect all of us.
Exactly. And it's not just about preventing bad outcomes. It's about harnessing the power of AGI to solve some of the biggest problems we face. Climate change, poverty, disease.
AGI could be an incredible force for good.
No question about it. But to unlock that potential, we have to be thoughtful. We have to be willing to have some tough conversations, really grapple with what intelligence and ethics mean in this new world and what it means to be human in an age of AGI.
That's a lot to consider. You've definitely given us plenty to think about. As we learn more about AGI, it's becoming clearer and clearer that this isn't just about better technology. It's a turning point for society. It's going to challenge everything we thought we knew and force us to rethink our place in the world. If you had to sum up the most important thing from everything we've discussed, what would it be?
I think the biggest takeaway is this. The future of AGI isn't set in stone. We have a say in this. What we do today, the choices we make, the conversations we have, those will determine if AGI ends up helping humanity or becoming something we can't control.
That's a powerful thought to end on. The future of AGI is in our hands. It's up to all of us to make sure we use this incredibly powerful technology wisely and for the benefit of everyone. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the world of AGI.